Thanks a lot for agreeing and for accepting our invitation to this. We have some connections in different contacts, and I'm happy that we continue these discussions here. And without wasting further time, I ask Eskil simply to take over and start his presentation.
Thank you. And thank you for the invitation. And I would like to start with the first page, the aging of population in many countries. If you take the next slide. It's a general problem in high-income countries that fertility is lower than 2.1 per woman, and it means that generations will be smaller, and it means also in the long run that more people will be older. And also mortality is important. People are living longer. It also means that more people are older in the economy. And then there are differences, of course, between different countries. In some countries, many people are emigrating to, in other countries, people are leaving, also inside Europe, mainly going from the eastern part of Europe to the western part of Europe. And so there are different developments of the size of population in different parts of Europe, north, west, east, south. But in all parts of Europe and also in other high-income countries, the populations are aging. And it also means that there is a lot of discussion about pension and pension systems. So there are different solutions discussed in different countries. And the next slide. And I will say something about different solutions, and I am writing about different solutions also from the Swedish Ministry of Finance. Have to complete the report in December, and it will be published in maybe January or February. And different policies, retired at higher age. It's a typical policy for many countries, but not for all countries. So you have protests against it in countries like Belgium, France, and Greece, for example. People want to have an old retirement age. Also important is to help young people to become employed at a lower age, complete their education at a lower age, lower the need rate. And also increase of the employment of women, higher labor force participation, fewer working part-time, fewer working short part-time, for example. And also increase the employment of newly arrived refugees. Integration policies is also important. And also assisting those with disabilities to get a job and also improve working conditions. And all those things are important, but there are problems, of course. And the next slide. You have changes in the pension systems in the European Union and also in other countries. First, you have automatic adjustment of a retirement age, increasing age for getting a pension. You have it in different countries, not in all countries, but many countries. And also lowering the level of pension to induce people to work to a higher age. You retire not at the age of 60, but at 65 or 70, and you get pension in less years, but you get a higher pension. And you also have rules regarding higher mandatory retirement age, lows on employment security. You have a right to continue to work, and you have changes like that in many countries. And the next. Also, you have increases of the fees to the pension system because it's becoming more and more expensive, the pension systems. Also changes in the rules for occupational and private pensions, so you can't use occupational pensions in the same way as before leaving the labor market early. Also enhance the lower retirement age for those in some occupations. Earlier had low retirement age in many occupations in many countries, but there are now not so much of those rules left in some of the countries at least. And also change from a defined benefit to a defined contribution system, first in Italy and Sweden in 1994, but you have it in other countries also. also inducing people to retire later. And the next, when you are discussing those things, you think it's easy. You just change the pension system, and then you have solved a problem, or part of a problem at least. But there are people who don't manage to work to old age, and you have it in all countries, of course. And you could have, for example, lower retirement age for those who have worked many years as a solution. It's called in Denmark the Arne pension, after a brewery worker who had started to work at the age of 16 and was very tired when he became 60 or a little bit more. Problem is that only a few are covered, because most people are not starting to work at a very low age. They are going to school, to high school, and then continuing, quite a few, to universities. And then you're not starting at the age of 16 or 70 or something like that. We also have a solution, a low retirement age for those in some professions or with some work tasks. A problem is that occupations change over time. Some occupations were very difficult to conduct maybe 20, 30 years ago, but they are not so difficult anymore. And other occupations are becoming more tiresome than before. And a third solution is part-time solutions for older workers to get a part-time pension. A problem is that it may lead to that some who could work full-time work part-time instead. So there is a discussion that you should start with a part-time solution at a higher age than mainly the main solution at the present time. And then we have some other solutions also. Disability pensions for those with reduced working ability. And of course, it's discussed that a better solution may be reduced working time or, of course, change of a work environment. A fourth solution is extended periods of unemployment benefits for older workers. We have had it in Sweden. The problem is that it may lead to higher unemployment among older workers, because when you are selecting who should leave, when a company is reducing the number employed, they may take the older workers because they have an unemployment benefit for a longer period. And the fifth solution may be support to vocational mobility for both older and, of course, workers in other age groups also. So when you are not able to continue to work in your occupation, you could get education to leave for another occupation. So there are solutions, and we are doing in different ways in different parts of the world. And for example, the Nordic countries and their aging population, you have relatively high fertility rates compared to other countries in Europe, for example, but still too low in a way to keep a constant population. And we are immigration countries in the Nordic countries. But we have high employment rates among those of active age. People are working, both men and women. But the Nordic countries have the same problems as other countries of the European Union, but they are less severe, but they are severe. And there are different solutions to propose for different countries. And there are many attempts to solution and discussion of solutions. And I mentioned Mercer, European Union, as two examples. Yes. And we have other countries in Europe also, of course. Most countries are not countries in Northern Europe. And you have low fertility rates, especially in Eastern and Southern Europe. So you have more severe problems in the long run. And you have low employment rates among those of active age in some of the countries. And you have emigration from countries in Eastern Europe, but now there are many migrants from Ukraine, of course. Solutions, the same type of solutions as in other countries, but you have the problem that some people are not able to continue to work to a higher age. So you need solutions for those who are not able to continue to work to a higher retirement age. And I mentioned different solutions earlier, and of course, they are also discussed in Eastern and Southern Europe. And then we should rely also on experiences in some countries in East Asia, because you have an even faster development to aging population in some countries in Eastern Asia that have very low fertility rates. Immigration may be a part of a solution, but there are other solutions also for Japan, Korea, Taiwan. And we are discussing that in a governmental commission now, and I am writing a text about the development in Taiwan and everything they have done in Taiwan to try to get a higher fertility rate. They have done a lot of things, and maybe they are seeing some change there. But this governmental report will be published probably in June the next year, and there are several people involved in it. So there are a lot of things to learn from other countries, but it's also a lot of things to learn, not only about successes, but also about problems. And there are several groups with problems relating to the changes in the policies regarding pensions. You have to have some solutions for those who are not able to continue to work to a higher age. So, some conclusions. All high-income countries have aging populations in using policy changes in the pension systems. And it is important to study different ways, making it possible for some to leave the labor market earlier than what others are doing. Not in a way discriminating, but helping people. And important to study the possibilities to increase employment among other groups as young people, women, refugees, and those with disabilities, to not solving all the problems with higher retirement age. And you have also a special problem, much discussed in Sweden, but also in other countries. There are a lot of people who have lived and worked in more than one country, and it have effects for the pensions they are receiving. And we should discuss it more and also try to find solutions for that problem. So this was a short 15 minutes presentations of some rather serious problems in our economies.
Thanks, Eskil. And I think that was a great overview. And is there any question before we come into David's comments? Or I think we have time for a short round, if that is needed. Doesn't look like. So then, David, do you simply want to start? And
yep, I'll just
share my
just share my screen. Okay, so thank you very much for inviting me to give these comments. Very honoured to give them to this excellent presentation. I think it really highlights sort of the complexity around extending working lives. I was thinking about there's a very good book by John McNichol called Neoliberalizing Older Age, and he was very critical of the sort of sole focus. He's actually quite critical of pension age rises, but he was critical of the sole reliance on pension age rises for addressing population aging. And he highlighted things like the productivity levels, which, say, in the UK context are low by international standards. The workforce, the amount of the workforce that's before later life that's in work, the amount of contribution that women provide to the workplace as well, the number of hours they work. And these kind of immigration as well was something he talked about. So there's lots going on in terms of extending working lives. I think that often, and also I think what really came out very nicely in the presentation was the real need to think about more vulnerable groups and what we do with those people as we get, or as societies ask people to work longer, because I think the general sense of trend across a lot of countries is very much focusing on financial incentives to work and cutting down financial incentives to work and getting people to make the correct decision to delay retirement. And I think in a lot of cases, there hasn't been as much thought about what we do more broadly in relation to kind of more vulnerable groups. So what I thought I'd just talk about in this presentation was a little bit of a commentary from the UK and what's happening in the UK, which is definitely not a country to be copied, I would say. I don't think many sociologists would think that was the case. But I think it's sort of illustrative of a broader trend, but it's a kind of an extreme one, I think. So I think the kind of UK state pension age rises have been quite fast in the, I mean, kind of in 2010, it was 60 for women, 65 for men. For women in particular, it's gone up really, really fast over a relatively short period of time. It's now 66. It's going to go up to 67 to 68 plus, and now they're talking in the press of pension ages in the 70s and this kind of thing. But I think, as I think the previous presentation sort of highlighted, you can't just look at state pension ages on their own as the only aspect of this, and I think you need to put it in a wider context. And I think there's been a wider trend of what we've talked about in previous research as being kind of neoliberal responsibilization, right? The idea that people have to choose to embrace opportunities to be kind of enterprising individuals, but they don't necessarily get as much support in terms of doing that. And if they fall through the net, then there's not so much for them. So in this regard, the UK is quite an extreme case. So the sort of neoliberal discourse that we see is one of helping individuals to help themselves. So we're giving all these opportunities to work. It's your responsibility to kind of choose them. So in a kind of a policy sense in the UK, we see that with people having the individual theoretical choice to continue working, but not the corresponding right to be supported sufficiently if they leave work. So in English-speaking countries, not just the UK, but Australia, United States, New Zealand, we've seen the abolition of mandatory retirement ages, which is a pretty radical policy, really. So what this means is that employers are not allowed to get rid of people on the basis of their age. They can't have a compulsory retirement age. Now, there might be some exceptions to that, but they're relatively minor for the most part in most of these countries, and the UK is the same. And so nowadays, people can theoretically continue working indefinitely. Obviously, employers can get rid of them if they're unproductive or whatever under normal law, but they have the theoretical choice to continue working. What they don't have in the UK context is, for example, much support if they were to leave early. So state pension ages are rising quite rapidly, but there's very little actual support for people if they leave work early. We don't in the UK have an earlier reduced state pension that you get in a lot of other countries. So in a lot of countries, you get a reduced amount of pension from maybe 62, 63, and that might enable you to perhaps cut down the number of hours and gradually move into retirement. We can't do that. We have to wait basically until the fixed retirement age. We've had a wider retrenchment of working age benefits. So benefits for people who slip out of the labour market and have to receive money from the government are incredibly low. They're poverty level low. I looked it up before this, and universal credit, which is one of the benefits given to people, was worth about 12.5% of average earnings. Right, very, very low. We used to have an earlier more generous unemployment system for people in there from 60 upwards if they fell out of work before state pension age. That's gone. And so people are having to kind of cling on to work. And if they don't, they're basically worried about the financial consequences. We also don't really have a great deal in the way of activation policies to support people into work. I mean, there are some all-age schemes to try and encourage people to take jobs, but they're not. There's a lot of literature on how Scandinavian countries fund activation policies much more than we do. But just to give you an example, we had a debate about careers guidance for people in their 50s, and we had this idea of midlife MOT. So you reach your your midlife and perhaps you need careers guidance in order to change career or change the way you work or something like that. And there were debates about kind of, how that would be provided, but there was no real money forthcoming for that. And now the idea of a midlife MOT is basically, for the most part, from a government perspective, a website which you put information in about your situation, and it encourages you to realize that you shouldn't be stupid and leave work early, and you should make the correct decision and continue working. So that's kind of been sort of the direction of travel in policy in the UK. So what has happened in this context of pressures to work longer, what's kind of happened to people working in later life? So as you'll see, this is people working, this is 2024 data, working ages 60 to 64 and 65 to 69. And you can see them, and it's kind of a 20-year period from 2000 to 2021. And what you see is basically there has been a rise in employment, particularly among women aged 60 to 64. And that's mainly because of state pension ages have risen for women to equalize with men and then go above 65. And you've seen a rise for men as well. But, and it's a big but, we still have an awful lot of people who are out of work before they're even 65, let alone the new state pension age. So only around kind of half of men are kind of working at that age, so half are not. And in the UK, it's around 60% of people are not working. So the majority are not working. So people, despite the financial pressures to work longer, a lot of people are still not working. Next slide, please. So how has this been influenced in terms of like debates around kind of what's going on? Well, the government's kind of response has been very much around sort of, as I said, trying to get people to realize that they need to work longer, quite often in UK pensions, because we've got defined contribution pensions, people maybe get a big lump sum when they retire potentially, which is very different from a defined benefit pension where you get a regular income, which is easier to assess. And so the argument is, well, people perhaps don't realize how long they need to work. They should, if they realized how long they need to work, then they'd continue, right? So that's been part of the debate. And after the kind of COVID period, we lost people in mid to later life because of COVID, but also because people left. And there was a big worry about this group in the 50s, 50 pluses group who are kind of leaving work. So from a government perspective, and this is kind of summed up a little bit by this newspaper article, which was not by a government person, but it taps into some of those debates, which basically says, get early retirees off the golf course and back to work. Why early retirement isn't good for UK PLC, right? So, I mean, golf in the UK is quite an expensive hobby, right? But I don't know how many people actually are on the golf course, literally. But there's a kind of a metaphor for what people need to do. They should be responsible. They should continue working. But how much of it actually is about retirement per se, and how much of it is about other things that were kind of alluded to and mentioned in the previous presentation. Next slide, please. So let's look at some statistics then, some basic statistics about why people are inactive. I found these online quite easily, government statistics from UK Labour Force Survey, I think. 2024, so relatively recent. People aged 50 to 65 who are economically inactive, and they're asked why they're economically inactive. Now, this is not about why did they leave the labour market, it's about why they self-define as being economically inactive. And bear in mind that we know that people, they lose their job, and then they self-define as being retired afterwards because it's less stigmatizing and because they don't think they're going to get another job. And that happens quite a lot. So if we actually, I found some statistics on why people leave work in their 60s, and the numbers change somewhat in that you get different categories like people losing their job, people being burnt out, people hating their job, stuff like this, right? But anyway, so these categories show 50 to 65. And what you see is that the biggest category is inactive, sick or disabled, right? And relatively small number of people who are unemployed. And retired is a significant, around about a third, but it's not the majority of lot. So it's not just people playing golf. Now, of course, if you were to look at the 60 to 65 group, then and they've got statistics on this, then the picture looks a little bit different, right? But retired becomes the biggest category, but you still have a hefty number of people are reporting that they're out of work due to inactivity, sickness, or health. Now, in the past, there's been literature on illness or ill health as a kind of pathway to early retirement. So people like Bernard Ebbinghaus wrote about this, and countries like the Netherlands were kind of famous for basically having people on, they were the sick men of Europe at one point. That's how they were described, because people were taking health benefits and were de facto kind of retired ultimately. So is this what's happening in the UK context? Well, I don't think it really is, to be honest with you. I mean, sickness and absence benefits, as I said, are very, very low. They're like 12% of previous earnings or something like that. And so people who end up on them end up often in really difficult financial position, in poverty and the like. And we also have a debate in the UK about health problems. So healthy life expectancy, which is life without a chronic health condition, has gone down, right? So we're getting less healthy. We might be living longer, but the period in which we're in good health has actually gone down a bit. And because of problems in our health service, we have people waiting for appointments to basically have their health conditions dealt with in order to go back to work, who aren't able to because they can't get the health care that they need. So it's more kind of, it's not really a kind of an incentives issue for a lot of people. There's issues around health inequalities. There's issues around the quality of work. A lot of people losing their jobs. A lot of people we know kind of burnt out, and also kind of issues around work intensification, which we also know has happened across European countries. The amount of work you have to produce within a given amount of time has gone up, and that's happened in the period when people have to work longer. Next slide, please. So I just thought I would just share, just to finish off, some kind of quotes from a project that I've been involved in, or I've been running recently, in which I've been interviewing divorced women on modest incomes who are working in their 60s. And they're interesting because obviously their life course has been one in which sometimes has been disrupted by having families and the like, and having less good pensions. But at the same time, they're kind of responsible for themselves to a significant degree. And what you find from talking to them is that, first of all, there's a huge amount of resistance to this extended working lives agenda. People are very, well, actually, it's more complex than that, but they're hugely angry about state pension age rises, and some resistance to that. So these are a couple of quotes about some of the issues around health, for example. So the top one was somebody who's working, I think they were working as a nurse. He says, I'm worrying all the time. I'm trying to rob Peter to pay Paul, which is a kind of expression for I'm trying to juggle my finances to make sure I survive. And she says, I worry all the time because I'm in agony. I do struggle in work, but I can't complain because I'm agency. So she can't complain about her health problems and the work and its impact on her, because she's worried that she's not going to get any shifts. So for some people in this point of life, they've got quite insecure work. The second one is from someone trying to navigate the benefit system. So universal credit, which is basically a system that subsidizes low paid work. And that puts pressure on people to increase their working hours and to do more work and to be less reliant on the state. And this example shows this woman, who was a very vulnerable individual, had a history of sort of quite serious mental health problems going back to childhood, had ill health as well, was working at doing washing up in a restaurant. And she says basically the benefits of staff put pressure on her to get more hours. She's 63, but what she's got bad health. What other kind of job could she do? And she says they'll pressurize you. They're pressuring me because if you don't do what they say, they stop your money, just like they've done in the past. So this person's like worried basically about kind of having to manage this system. Next slide, please. Here's somebody else. I've been working since I was 17. I'm tired. I'd like to stop working. The fact that I can't is really not a happy thing. What frightens me is what when I won't be able to work in my 70s and 80s, when no work is possible. That's worrying, obviously. I mean, this is bleak stuff. They don't really think they're going to work until they drop, as far as they're concerned. And it's not, when you talk to them, they've got, it sounds like a fair assessment. And finally, it's an inflexible system. So not all people we interviewed wanted to kind of stop working, but they perhaps wanted to reduce their working hours. And this was an example of someone. If I had the money to finish work tomorrow from a state pension, I wouldn't just finish work, I'd go part-time. They just want to drop 1 day a week. That's all they want to do. But you can't always get what you want. I'm furious with the government for the pension age rises. So it doesn't enable people to be flexible around this period of life when flexibility is required. Final slide, please. So concluding thoughts. So the previous presentation, I think, was excellent in terms of highlighting the policies, the potential policies responding to the population, and had a really nice emphasis on the importance of protecting people who are vulnerable, which is it's not a small number in a lot of countries, it's a significant number. But I think often the policy emphasis is on getting people to make the correct choice and realize and work longer and delay retirement. Whereas I think the previous presentation highlighted some of the kind of the complexities around this. And I think the UK is an extreme example of this focus on giving people the right to choose to be free enterprising individuals, but not really giving them the sort of safety net sometimes to support them. Or perhaps kind of support to remain in work. Now, I know the UK is admittedly an extreme example, and it'd be interesting to have a discussion about, what we see in other countries. And I look forward to reading Professor Wadensjö's report as well. That would be very interesting reading. But I'll end there.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Thanks a lot for this. It's not just a comment, but I think it's a kind of a specification of because we had two perspectives. Eskil, you focus very much on the maybe not broader, but the general trend with population aging and the policies reacting on it. And from David, we had kind of a focus on the UK, more narrow perspective, but showing the complexities of the topic in a more detailed case. And I think that in a combination, that was extremely helpful for me. And there is probably comments or reactions and remarks on this. And I just invite you to take the opportunity at least. Eskil, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation and the comments, and I think it's very helpful. It also shows that there are differences between different countries, also in Europe. We have the same problem, but we have different solutions, and we have different situations. And in the study I'm doing, we are trying to compare different countries also, and we can see that people continue to work in some countries for more years than in other countries. And if you compare countries in Europe, we can see that they are continuing to work most for more years in Iceland, and then the Netherlands, and then in Sweden. Sweden is number 3. But in all countries, you have people who have problems, even if there are more people continuing to work in Sweden than in the United Kingdom. There are still quite a few people who have problems continuing to work and having problems with changes in the policies, in the retirement age, and so on. So we have a common problem in practice in all European countries.
Thanks. And yeah, David, just directly.
Unless anybody else has got a question, I've got.
No, just go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to ask Professor Wadensjö about. You mentioned the ARNS. Is it the ARNS system of you get a pension? You get one earlier if you started working earlier, but because that's quite an interesting policy.
Yeah, it's a Danish policy, and it was introduced, decided in 2001, and it was a case discussed very much. And brewery worker, he had started to work at the age of 16, and was very tired. He was, I guess, 60 or something like that. And it was a big political discussion in Denmark. And then they got a change. And the change was that if you had worked 44 years since from the age of 16, you take 44 years, you could have worked, missed some years, but 44 years, you get a 3-year lower retirement age, and you got a full pension. And if you have worked 43 years, you get 2 years lower. And if you have worked 42 years, you get 1 year later, lower retirement age. And it was much discussed in Denmark and decided by the parliament. And of course, only a few people have been working so much. So of course it was a solution for some people, but not for all older people.
Interesting.
But the some people perspective is of course critical, because it's a massive gender bias in this, of course. And quite also massive bias when it comes to occupations which are favored by this and not. I mean, there's a similar solution in the German system, and it becomes also costly by this. And but Per, sorry.
Yeah, thank you for very nice presentations. I have a small comment and a question, and that it goes on that we are in a transition towards a society where becomes the obligation for everybody to work longer. We are expecting young people to enter the labor market at an earlier age than they did previously. Women are expected to work longer, and older adults are expected to work longer. So we should all work longer. And then, of course, not everybody are able to work longer. But there is no objective line as to when you are able to work or not to work. And therefore, how do we determine that people are not able to work? And previously, we had these work tests. And my impression is also that these voluntary early retirement routes, they have been closed down, more or less. And what we see is that what is left is more or less these work test program, and where these work tests, they are straightened. So this choice whether to work or not to work doesn't exist any longer, more or less. You are forced to work. And you are only allowed to leave the labor market if you pass these harsh work tests, more or less.
Anninga Hilsen, the Norwegian case. I think it's not, I don't really have that much of a question, but I do have a commentary, because I think these two presentations works great together. Because what Eskil was talking about is we can't just focus on older people. That's not the only solution. I mean, we need a broader kind of people to join the labor market, and that can be solved in other ways as well. So I like your idea, kind of broader perspective on this challenge. And then on the other hand, you have Dave's warning of what happens if we go for this, yes, just go work longer, kind of get your thing together and keep working till your 70s or 80s. It's 72 in Norway now. And without remembering, you have a lot of vulnerable groups in this case as well. You have people who can't work longer. They have been working in hard jobs since they were 18, 17, 16, 18, and they're worn out. And what is kind of the safety net for them? I mean, we do have a fairly generous safety net in Norway, but it's still the message in a lot of these active aging policies is kind of just do it. It's your responsibility. And I think we picked up a lot of those examples that Dave gave us from the UK way of thinking about this. And I think that's definitely something we should be scared of. So in a way, it's a warning. Some people can and will work longer, definitely, and should be able to do it, but not everybody. And so we do need a more varied approach to this. So I think these two presentations together is a very good message to go forward with. So thank you so much.
And then we're on the track for precarity and retirement policy, prolongation of working life, but also early retirement. In this case, is this? I think it's David. It's mostly what's on your agenda in this case, and I know. But is this a big issue and also in UK policies? I mean, with that discussion, we get closer to precarity or to problematic living conditions under the prolongation policies. As we said, not everybody can work longer. Not everybody has the capacities. Not everybody has the workplaces for it. We have the decent work problem. Where is the work that is available for these prolonged life courses? But is that mostly the main track? I mean, scientifically, it is an important track. But is it in the main track in the public discourse also in the UK?
There's multiple discourses going on at the same time. I think. But I think there is a strong reaction against like extended the pension age rises in particular, and there was a statistic that it was from a report that was done by an insurance company. So you have to kind of take it with a little bit of a pinch of salt. But I think it was done by a reasonably good sort of survey house or whatever, and they asked people whether they were worried about extended work, having to work longer. And I think this was a few years ago, and it was like 3/4 of people said they worried about having to work longer, and people at different ages. So I think there's a lot of fear and concern and anxiety about it. And some people may manage to struggle on in work. You know, some of the people interviewed would say, you know, my main aim is just to get to state pension age, just keep going until state pension age. But it's also the fact that you're worried about what would happen if you didn't. And even if you managed to make it to the state pension age in one piece and you retired or whatever, if you could, then it's the psychological toll, I think, on people. I think people are stressed and this kind of thing. I think we've got our own economic problems, generally speaking. I don't want to overstate them, but they're obviously, we know about them. So it's broader than just pension age rises or something like that. It's a political change. I mean, it's interesting that, you know, that we're moving towards the populist right as well, politically speaking as well. You see that in the polls, you know, like a lot of countries. And it's interesting to see what happens with sort of debates about extended working life in that context, because, you know, the populist right sometimes uses some of this stuff without being very constructive about how to solve it. But they use it as a gripe that they, you know, are working longer, but they obviously don't have any solutions to any of this stuff, you know, which are complex and require, you know, focus on product. We've got low productivity, you know, there's issues around productivity, around, you know, lots of different things of good jobs, decent work.
What's the alternative to these policies? I mean, we had this Norwegian perspective of bringing other people into other work into the labor market. It's not just the old that need to work longer, but is that a real potential, or do we have already a lack of qualified work, which reduces productivity, and there's maybe no potential?
Well, I think in the UK context, I mean, after the financial crash of 2008, a lot of the jobs that were replaced by really quite insecure and low quality, lower service type work. I think that's true. I think policy wise, you know, do we have to think about basic incomes for people of a certain age or something like that? That basically, I don't know if that's a solution, but I mean, one of the issues is around, you know, you can continue working. I think people perhaps don't mind working a bit longer, but they don't want to always work in exactly the same way, or they might want a sabbatical, or we have to be more creative about how we do these things. So not so that we just have like a cliff edge that's like 70 and then you have to get to that point. We have to think about how we can ease people into it. You know, I think we have to be more creative. We have to think more carefully about these things, which is obviously very hard.
Eskil, is there any difference between different countries in this? I mean, the UK has its specific problems and its specific complexities, of course. But of course, there is differences. But how is it structured? We talked about in the beginning about rich or wealthy societies. It has something to do with the productivity in general, or with the general employment rates that we have reached already in late working life, or how does it look like, at least in the European Union?
I think we have more or less the same problem, but we have different solutions, and the problems may be more severe in some countries than in other countries. And I think we should look more on different solutions to get more people in the labor force, as for example, young people completing their education a little bit faster, men and women getting working about to the same extent regarding full time, and also getting people with different forms of disabilities more into the labor force, and of course also integrating the refugees better in the labor markets. There's a lot of solutions, and the solutions are different to different countries, but we have to work on it. And some countries have a little bit better solutions already, and a small country, when we are making comparisons, we would find almost every time that Iceland has a better situation than any country in the European Union. And it's a small country, but I think we should look at them and try to find out how do they manage.
We talk about this aging issue, or these policies around these changes as if it's quite isolated. But if you look at Iceland, that may also be a hint that problems may also relate to what we like to describe as a polycrisis, or so these multiple crises that we have: the economic crisis, policy crisis. David, you mentioned the rise of the right, or the populist right. And in this case, how is that embedded into this, and also how does that impact the availability of solutions, or maybe the need for solutions? Of course, clear, but how does it affect the potential of policies to react adequately?
Of course, it has different effects in different countries. Some countries have more political conflicts and political development in the direction you described, and in some countries it's not a severe problem in the same way as Iceland, for example. And of course, it's the political solutions are not easy, so it means that you need that many political parties agree, several political parties agree with the solutions, and also making solutions for those who are not able to adjust to the changes. I think it's very important, as mentioned from the UK case, that if you enhance the retirement age, some people are really distressed.
I mean, the Norwegian example with not necessarily high productivity, but at least with an extremely high wealth, maybe or Iceland is that you mentioned before, are quite interesting example on one side of the scale, at least, where you have at least the economic resources for redistribution. But if you look for, or even at the country of Germany, which looks like frozen in political terms. So they don't, where the margins are a little bit difficult, and others are even worse economically. Is there something that could we can still generalize, or?
Generalize is that there is not one solution for the demographic problem, but you need a lot of different solutions, a lot of different policies to counteract that fewer and fewer people will be of active age. So it's not, you shouldn't try to find one solution, but you need several solutions, several policies to counteract the problem.
Does this create a risk for isolated solutions also in terms of mobility and mobile biographies or careers in the European Union? Because then the more you find specific solutions, the more complicated it is to switch between countries. I mean, I know what if I look at my pension portfolio in the future,
it's a problem because people are moving inside the European Union, and also between other countries to European countries, and it's a problem to get a pension of the same size if you have worked in several different countries. Yes. So it's, and you have different retirement age, and you are coming from one country with a low retirement age to a country with a high retirement age, and you are a bit surprised that you you are not able to retire at the same age as those staying in your home country.
Exactly, yeah. That's of course. Sorry, David.
No. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just had a question, really. I mean, I think if we're thinking about who's involved in these kind of what we're trying to what are, you know, trade unions are obviously might be an example. You know, in countries that have got big collective bargaining agreements, and trade unions are still to some degree involved in workplace relations and things like that. They, you know, you can think of trade. You know, some of these things bring trade-offs, and you know, maybe that's an opportunity to do things. You know, to have collectively agreed agreements within sectors or whatever that address some of these issues and universalize some of the trade-offs or prevent a race to the bottom in all this. I don't know what you think, Eskil. Is that a
if you take Sweden, for example, you have in a way complicated retirement pension system. You have public pension system, but you also have the collective agreed pensions, and they are added. So it's not that you are you have, and then you could also have private pensions. It means that for many people, the occupational pensions are more important than the public pension. So it's very important for collective agreements, and the collective agreements have been there since the 18th century in the state sector, and then in the private sector in the 19th century. So they were before the national pension system. So they are combined in a rather complicated way. So to describe all the details in the Swedish pension system, you need not an article but a book.
Well, who writes this book? But let's see. Any more comments from this quite big group today? So then I would like to thank you for these great presentations and for the also willingness to discuss this further. I think we need to continue. Of course, we will not reach a point of saturation here today, and we probably raised mentioned some of the problems that we have to deal with. And yeah, again, also thank you for the audience for participating today. And hand over to Gülin. Do we have a plan for next webinar already, or do we have a topic?
Not yet, but we will announce soon all the participants and in emailing lists.
You will not
and
be
we
able
have
to
the
avoid
dates.
Receiving emails about this, and I hope to see you soon again. And yeah, thanks again for Eskil and David for the nice presentation, also for these inspirations. And yeah, I look forward to meeting again also in real life soon.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you.
Bye.